When a human gets angry, even the strongest alien empires know to run and hide, or face utter annihilation. But the Ocampans were about to learn this lesson the hard way. Dylan Parker awoke with a jolt on the hard, frigid floor of an Ocampan holding cell. The 32-year-old human soldier had been on a routine scouting mission near the edge of human-controlled space when the insectoid aliens ambushed his ship. Now he found himself stripped of weapons and armor, with only a tattered and bloodied military uniform to shield him from the numbing cold of the alien brig. Suddenly, the reinforced cell door slid open with a menacing hiss. A towering Ocampan guard, its chitinous purple exoskeleton glinting under harsh lights, roughly yanked Dylan to his feet. The creature's 6 powerful limbs held him in an iron grip as it dragged him through winding corridors to a darkened interrogation chamber. There, an even larger Ocampan awaited, Umbra, a high-ranking military official. The alien's blood-red compound eyes glowed with malice as it loomed over the captive human. In a grating, inhuman voice, Umbra demanded the location of Earth's main military base. Dylan spat in the creature's face, defiant even as fear coiled in his gut. He knew the stakes. If the Ocampans discovered the heart of humanity's defenses, Earth was doomed. Enraged, Umbra seized a neural pain inducer and jammed it against Dylan's skull. White-hot agony lanced through his brain, every nerve ending screaming in unison. Through the haze of pain, he heard the aliens' clicking laughter and a chilling revelation. The Ocampans had been secretly planning an invasion of Earth for years. Dylan's capture was only the beginning. As Dylan writhed on the floor, Umbra's words echoed in his mind. The survival of the human race hung in the balance. If he broke under torture, if he revealed what the Ocampans needed to know, it would all be over. Humanity's last hope rested on his shoulders, even as darkness closed in around him. The war had begun, and failure was not an option. Bruised, bloody, and battered, Dylan found himself back in his cramped holding cell after the brutal torture session. His body ached and his head throbbed, but he refused to give up. He scanned the cell for any means of escape, his eyes finally settling on a small ventilation shaft near the ceiling. It was a long shot, but it was his only chance. Using a jagged piece of metal that he managed to pry loose from the cell wall, Dylan spent hours painstakingly working on the ventilation cover. His fingers were raw and bleeding, but he persisted. Finally, with a satisfying click, the cover came loose. Dylan hoisted himself up and crawled into the narrow shaft, his muscular 220-pound frame barely fitting through the opening. Relying on his military training and keen sense of direction, Dylan navigated the maze-like ventilation system. He crawled for what seemed like miles, the metal walls pressing in on him from all sides. At last he reached another opening and dropped down into a deserted corridor. Dylan crept along the corridor, his senses on high alert. He knew he had to find a way off this accursed ship. Suddenly, as he turned a corner, he found himself face to face with 2 Ocampan guards. They stared at him in shock, their compound eyes wide with surprise. Without hesitation, Dylan charged at the guards, catching them completely off guard. He grappled with one of them, his strong hands wrenching the plasma rifle from the alien's grasp. Dylan fired 2 quick blasts, the searing plasma bolts striking each guard in the chest. They crumpled to the floor, their exoskeletons smoking. Dylan quickly searched the fallen guards, taking their weapons and equipment. He found a portable energy shield and a universal translator device, which he clipped to his belt. Armed and ready, he made his way towards the ship's hangar bay. As he entered the massive hangar, Dylan spotted a small Ocampan scout ship. It was his ticket out of here, but between him and freedom stood dozens of heavily armed Ocampan soldiers. Plasma bolts flew as Dylan engaged the aliens in a fierce firefight. His superior combat skills and lightning-fast reflexes allowed him to outmaneuver and outgun the Ocampans. He dodged and weaved, his stolen plasma rifle blazing, cutting down soldier after soldier. Finally, after a harrowing battle, Dylan reached the scout ship. He leaped inside, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar controls. The ship powered up, its engines humming to life. Just as the mothership's alarms began to sound, Dylan punched the thrusters and rocketed out of the hangar bay. As he piloted the stolen ship away from the Ocampan mothership, Dylan's thoughts turned to Earth. He had to warn them of the impending invasion. He had to find a way to stop the Ocampans, no matter the cost. The fate of humanity rested in his hands, and failure was not an option. Dylan piloted the stolen Ocampan scout ship away from the enemy mothership, his heart pounding in his chest. He realized the universe-changing importance of his escape. Dylan engaged the FTL drive and set a course for Proxima B, the nearest human outpost. He ached and sweated from the torture, but focused on finding a way to warn Earth. As the alien craft hurtled through the stars, Dylan dug through the ship's computer systems. His eyes widened as he discovered detailed plans, coordinates and diagrams outlining the Ocampan's secret invasion of Earth. The sheer scale of the enemy forces stunned him. Thousands of warships, millions of soldiers. Earth had no idea what was coming. Suddenly, proximity alarms blared. The HMS Valiant, a human patrol frigate, had intercepted Dylan's ship as it approached Proxima B. A gruff voice crackled over the comms. Unidentified Ocampan vessel. This is Captain Marcus Reeves of the HMS Valiant. You are trespassing in human space. Prepare to be boarded. Dylan activated the Universal Translator. Captain Reeves, I'm Captain Dylan Parker of the Terran Defense Force. I've just escaped from an Ocampan mothership with critical intelligence. Earth is in grave danger. There was a pause. Then Captain Reeves replied, his tone skeptical. How do I know this isn't a trick? I have proof, Dylan said, transmitting the invasion plans from the scout ship's computer to the Valiant. Please, Captain, we don't have much time. Minutes later, Dylan was aboard the Valiant, standing before Captain Reeves and his senior officers. Reeves, a 45-year-old veteran with a scarred face and piercing eyes, studied the data from the Ocampan ship. My God, he muttered. They're really going to do it, a full-scale invasion. Reeves immediately contacted Earth Central Military Command, relaying the dire information. He slammed a fist against the console. Mobilize everything we've got. This is a code black emergency. On Earth, alarms sounded as the planet's leaders absorbed the news of the impending Ocampan attack. Armies assembled, warships launched, and defenses were hurriedly fortified. A grim determination settled over the human population. They would not go down without one hell of a fight. Meanwhile, military intelligence officers subjected Dylan to intense debriefing. They were shocked by his revelations about the Ocampan's advanced weaponry and technology. It quickly became clear that Earth's current defenses were woefully inadequate to repel the coming onslaught. Promoted to the rank of captain, Dylan was given command of a hand-picked special operations team. His mission, infiltrate Ocampan space, gather intelligence, and disrupt the enemy's invasion efforts by any means necessary. Dylan's team was the best of the best. Mike Gunnar Thompson, his best friend and weapons expert, Dr. Alex Nakamura, a brilliant xenobiologist specializing in alien physiology, and Lieutenant Laura Chen, a top-notch hacker and communications officer. Together they embarked on a series of daring raids deep behind enemy lines. They sabotaged Ocampan supply depots, intercepted crucial communications, and even managed to capture a high-ranking Ocampan general. Each mission brought new dangers and challenges, but Dylan and his team never wavered. They knew that every bit of intel they gathered, every Ocampan facility they destroyed, bought Earth precious time to prepare for the coming storm. But as the Ocampan invasion fleet drew ever closer, a sense of dread began to grow within Dylan. Even with his team's heroic efforts, would it be enough? Could humanity hope to stand against the full might of the insectoid empire? The fate of Earth and the entire human race hung in the balance. The war was about to begin in earnest, and Dylan knew that he and his fellow soldiers would have to fight like never before. Failure was not an option, for if the Ocampans succeeded in their conquest, it would mean the end of everything they held dear. As Dylan and his team carried out their daring raids behind enemy lines, Earth's top scientists raced against time to unravel the secrets of the captured Ocampan technology. In a secure research facility buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Alex Nakamura pored over the alien devices, his brilliant mind working overtime. After countless sleepless nights and endless cups of coffee, Dr. Nakamura made a groundbreaking discovery. He burst into the command center, his eyes wide with excitement. "I found the key to their advanced weapons and ships," he exclaimed, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "It's a rare mineral called novasite. The Ocampan's technology relies on it." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. General Samantha Thompson, a battle-hardened veteran with piercing blue eyes, leaned forward. "Where can we find this novasite?" she asked, her voice low and urgent. Dr. Nakamura brought up a holographic star map. "It's only found on a handful of planets," he said, pointing to a cluster of glowing dots. "If we can seize control of these worlds and cut off the Ocampan's supply—" "We could cripple their war machine," General Thompson finished, a grim smile spreading across her face. She turned to her officers. "I want a plan of attack on my desk within the hour. We're going to hit the Ocampans where it hurts." Within days, Dillon and his team were briefed on their new mission. They would lead a series of high-stakes raids on the novasite mines, starting with the harsh desert world of Kepler 186f. As their stealth ship descended through the planet's atmosphere, Dillon felt a familiar rush of adrenaline. He checked his weapons for the 100th time, the weight of his plasma rifle reassuring in his hands. The ship touched down in a swirling cloud of sand, and Dillon's team moved out, their footsteps muffled by the howling wind. The Ocampan mining facility loomed ahead, its metal spires jutting from the desert like the bones of some long-dead leviathan. They split into two groups, Dillon and Gunner taking point while Dr. Nakamura and Lieutenant Chen circled around to the facility's control center. They moved swiftly and silently, planting explosive charges at key structural points. But as they neared the heart of the mine, an alarm suddenly pierced the air. They'd been discovered. Ocampan guards swarmed from every direction, their plasma bolts sizzling through the air. Dillon and Gunner dove for cover, returning fire with deadly precision. Gunner's custom-built railgun roared to life, the hypersonic slugs tearing through the Ocampan's chitinous armor like tissue paper. He moved with fluid grace, a one-man army, leaving a trail of shattered bodies in his wake. In the control room, Lieutenant Chen's fingers flew across the alien computer console, her brow furrowed in concentration. With a final triumphant keystroke, she hacked into the facility's security system, disabling the alarms and sealing the doors. They fought their way back to the stealth ship, plasma bolts scorching the air around them. As they lifted off, Dillon thumbed the detonator. The desert erupted in a massive fireball, the shockwave rocking the ship as they rocketed into the sky. News of the successful raid spread like wildfire through the human colonies. The destruction of the novasite mine was a major blow to the Ocampans and a powerful symbol of hope for the beleaguered human resistance. But there was no time to rest on their laurels. Even as they plotted their next move, an urgent message came through on the secure channel. The Ocampans had launched a surprise attack on the human colony in the Epsilon Eridani system. Millions of lives hung in the balance. Dillon's jaw tightened as he read the report, a cold fury burning in his gut. He turned to his team, his eyes hard as flint. "Looks like we've got a change of plans," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "We're going to Epsilon Eridani, and we're going to make those bug-eyed bastards pay." The ship's engines roared to life as they plotted a course for the besieged colony, racing against time to intercept the Ocampan fleet. The fate of an entire world rested on their shoulders. Failure was not an option. Dillon gripped the armrests of his seat aboard the HMS Valiant as the ship hurtled through hyperspace towards the Epsilon Eridani system. The engines strained, pushed to their limits by the desperate urgency of their mission. Every second counted. Millions of lives hung in the balance. As they dropped out of hyperspace on the outskirts of the system, Dillon's blood ran cold. The Ocampan fleet filled the viewport, a swarm of angular black ships bristling with weapons. At the center of the formation loomed a colossal dreadnought, easily dwarfing the Valiant. The dreadnought's main cannon glowed with an eerie purple light as it fired on the colony below. The planet's surface erupted in flames, cities turned to ash in an instant. "Evasive maneuvers," Reeves barked. The Valiant swerved, narrowly avoiding a barrage of plasma. "Get our guns online, we need to draw their fire." The human ship returned fire, its railguns spitting hypervelocity slugs at the Ocampan fleet. Explosions blossomed against the enemy's shields as the two fleets clashed. In the chaos, a small shuttle launched from the Valiant's hangar bay. Dylan was at the controls, his team strapped in behind him. "Gunner Chen, get ready," Dylan called over the roar of the engines. "We're going to board that dreadnought and take it down from the inside." The shuttle weaved through the battle, dodging debris and energy blasts. As they approached the dreadnought, Dylan saw Ocampan soldiers scrambling in the hangar bays, rushing to their fighters. The shuttle smashed through the dreadnought's hangar shield, skidding across the deck in a shower of sparks. Dylan and his team leaped out, weapons blazing. Ocampan soldiers swarmed towards them, plasma rifles spitting deadly bolts. Gunner's railgun roared, each shot punching through armor and exoskeleton. Chen vanished in a shimmering cloak of light, her stealth field rendering her invisible as she slipped behind enemy lines. Dylan charged forward, his enhanced muscles propelling him at inhuman speed. He crashed into an Ocampan soldier, shattering the alien's carapace with a single blow. His plasma rifle flashed, cutting down Ocampan's left and right. They fought their way through the ship, leaving a trail of twisted Ocampan corpses in their wake. Alarms blared, the dreadnought's crew desperately trying to repel the boarders. At last they reached the bridge. The doors exploded inward, Dylan striding through the smoke like an avenging angel. There, waiting for him, stood Zarek. The Ocampan commander was a towering figure, his exoskeleton adorned with glittering badges of rank. His four arms each wielded a crackling energy blade, the weapons humming with deadly power. "How dare to challenge me, human?" Zarek hissed, his mandibles clicking in anger. "I will tear the flesh from your bones." Dylan said nothing. He tossed his rifle aside and unsheathed his own blade, a monomolecular edge glinting in the light. The two warriors circled each other, eyes locked. Then, in a blur of motion, they clashed. Sparks flew as their blades met, the air sizzling with energy. Dylan's enhanced speed matched Zarek's natural swiftness, their movements a deadly dance. Zarek's four arms were a whirlwind of slashing blades, but Dylan parried each strike, his own blade darting in to score hits on the Ocampan's tough hide. They fought back and forth across the bridge, consoles smashing and sparking under their blows. As they grappled, Dylan's eye caught a glint of metal on Zarek's wrist, a strange device pulsing with an otherworldly light. Realization dawned. This was the key to the Ocampan fleet, the source of their coordination and power. With a burst of strength, Dylan seized Zarek's arm. The Ocampan screeched in rage, but Dylan held on, his fingers scrabbling for the device. With a final desperate wrench, he tore it free. Zarek staggered back, his eyes widening in horror. Across the battlefield, the Ocampan fleet faltered, their ships suddenly drifting aimlessly. The dreadnought shuddered, its lights flickering. Seizing the moment, the human fleet surged forward. A storm of missiles and plasma rained down on the Ocampans, tearing through their disorganized ranks. Explosions lit the void as ship after ship crumbled under the onslaught. Dylan stood on the bridge, breathing hard, the strange device clutched in his hand. Zarek lay dead at his feet, the once mighty Ocampan commander reduced to a shattered husk. In the aftermath of the battle, as the human ships mopped up the remaining Ocampan forces, Dylan and his team were hailed as heroes. They had turned the tide, snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. But even as the celebrations began, a chill ran down Dylan's spine. Dr. Nakamura's face filled the view screen, his expression grave. "Captain Parker," he said, his voice urgent, "that device you recovered, it's more than just a control unit, it's a key." Dylan frowned, turning the strange object over in his hands. "A key to what?" "An ancient weapon," Nakamura replied, his eyes haunted. a weapon of unimaginable power hidden somewhere in the galaxy, and the Ocampans were searching for it. A cold realization settled over Dylan. The Battle of Epsilon Eridani was just the beginning. The true fight was still to come, and if the Ocampans found this weapon first... He looked out at the stars, his jaw set with determination. No matter the cost, no matter the danger, he would not let that happen. The fate of humanity depended on it. Back on the Valiant, Dr. Nakamura pored over the strange device, his brow furrowed in intense concentration. Lines of alien code scrolled across the screen as he worked to decipher its secrets. After hours of tireless effort, Nakamura let out a triumphant shout. "I've got it!" He brought up a holographic display, a star map flickering to life above the console. The device contains coordinates to a planet called Odysseus Prime. And there's something else. Dylan leaned in, his eyes narrowing. "What is it?" "References to an ancient weapon," Nakamura said, his voice hushed with awe. "Something called the Omega device." A chill ran down Dylan's spine. An alien weapon of untold power, hidden away on a long-forgotten world. If the Ocampans got their hands on it... "We have to find it first," Dylan said, his jaw set with determination, "before the Ocampans regroup and launch another attack." The Valiant sped through the stars, following the coordinates from the device. As they ventured into uncharted space, a strange vessel suddenly appeared on their sensors. It was unlike any ship they had ever seen, sleek and silver, with an ethereal glow. A voice crackled over the comms, calm and measured. "Greetings, humans, we are the Protheans." Dylan and his crew exchanged wary glances. The Protheans, an enigmatic species, had kept to the shadows, observing the conflict between humans and Ocampans from afar. "We know of your quest," the Prothean continued, "and we must warn you, the Omega device is not to be trifled with." The Prothean ship docked with the Valiant, and a delegation of tall, slender aliens strode onto the bridge. Their skin was a pale blue, their eyes deep and knowing. "We created the device," the lead Prothean said, "as a last resort against a terrible threat that once ravaged the galaxy. It has the power to destroy entire star systems. In the wrong hands..." Dylan swallowed hard. The stakes had just gotten even higher. But he knew they had no choice. They couldn't let the Ocampans claim such a devastating weapon. "We have to try," he said, meeting the Prothean's gaze. "We can't let the Ocampans win." The Prothean inclined his head. "Very well, but be warned. The path ahead is fraught with danger." The Valiant pressed on, the star map guiding them to the desolate world of Odysseus Prime. They descended through the planet's atmosphere, the landscape below a bleak expanse of crumbling ruins and shifting sands. As they set down near what appeared to be an ancient temple complex, a plasma blast suddenly rocked the ship. Alarms blared as Dylan and his team raced to the armory, gearing up for battle. They emerged into the harsh light of Odysseus Prime's twin suns to find a heavily armed Ocampan strike force bearing down on them. And at their head, a familiar figure, Umbra, the sadistic military official who had tortured Dylan. Dylan's blood ran cold as Umbra's malevolent glare fixed on him. The Ocampan's mandibles twisted in a cruel approximation of a smile. "We meet again, human," Umbra hissed, raising his plasma rifle. "This time you will not escape." All hell broke loose. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Dylan and his team dove for cover, returning fire with grim determination. Gunner's railgun roared, each shot punching through Ocampan armor like paper. Lieutenant Chen vanished in a shimmering cloak, her stealth field rendering her invisible as she flanked the enemy. But the Ocampans kept coming, pouring out of dropships like a chitinous tide. For every soldier they cut down, 2 more seemed to take their place. In the chaos of battle, Dylan found himself face to face with Umbra. The Ocampan commander lunged at him, plasma blades flashing. Dylan parried the blow, his own combat knife sparking against the alien metal. They clashed in a brutal dance, Dylan's enhanced reflexes and raw determination pitted against Umbra's ruthless skill. Blow for blow, slash for slash, they fought across the blood-soaked sands. In the temple ruins, Dr. Nakamura searched desperately for the Omega device. His heart pounded as he scanned the ancient glyphs and symbols, trying to decipher their meaning. Time was running out. Outside, Dylan and Umbra's battle reached a fever pitch. Umbra's blade slashed at Dylan's face, drawing blood, but Dylan refused to yield. With a final, desperate lunge, he drove his combat knife into Umbra's chest, piercing the Ocampan's exoskeleton. Umbra staggered back, dark ichor spurting from the wound. He let out a gurgling laugh, his eyes burning with hatred. "You may have won this battle, human," he rasped, "but the war is far from over." With a final, shuddering breath, Umbra collapsed to the sand, his lifeless eyes staring up at the twin suns. Dylan staggered to his feet, breathing hard. The battle still raged around him, but they had struck a critical blow. They had to press on. In the temple, Dr. Nakamura let out a triumphant shout, "I've found it!" But as he reached for the Omega device, a hidden trap triggered. The room shook violently, ancient stones crumbling and crashing down around them. "Dark," Dylan yelled into his comm, "get out of there!" He raced into the temple, dodging falling debris. He found Nakamura in the heart of the ruins, the Omega device clutched in his hands. The room was collapsing, the very ground beneath their feet giving way. Dylan grabbed Nakamura, hauling him towards the exit. They ran as the temple imploded behind them, ancient ruins crumbling to dust. They burst out into the open air, just as the last of the Ocampan strike force fell before Gunnar and Chen's relentless assault. Breathing hard, Dylan stared at the strange, pulsing device in Nakamura's hands. The key to an ancient weapon of unimaginable power. The fate of the galaxy had just taken a new and terrifying turn. But they had the Omega device, and with it perhaps a fighting chance to turn the tide of this devastating war. The battle for Odysseus Prime was over, but Dylan knew with grim certainty that the true fight was only just beginning. Dylan and his team returned to Earth with the Omega device, their stolen Ocampan scout ship streaking through the atmosphere. They landed at a secure military base where they were greeted by cheering crowds and a hero's welcome. But the celebration was cut short as alarms blared across the base. General Thompson rushed to meet them, her face grim. "The Ocampans have launched a full-scale invasion," she said, her voice tight with tension. "They're attacking on multiple fronts, led by a new commander named Kagar. Our defenses are being overwhelmed." Dylan's heart sank as he watched the news feeds, showing Ocampan ships unleashing devastating strikes on human colonies and outposts. Earth itself was under siege, with Ocampan ground forces landing in cities across the planet. In the command center, Dr. Nakamura studied the Omega device, his brow furrowed in concentration. Suddenly his eyes widened in horror. He turned to Dylan, his voice trembling. "Captain, there's something you need to know about the device. To activate its full power, it requires a living sacrifice." Dylan felt a chill run down his spine. He looked at the device, then at the screen showing the destruction wrought by the Ocampans. Earth needed a miracle, and he was prepared to give everything to save his home. He squared his shoulders, his jaw set with determination. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady. "I'll be the sacrifice." As they prepared for their final, desperate mission, an unexpected transmission came through. On the screen, an Ocampan soldier appeared, but unlike the others, he wore no insignia of rank, and his compound eyes held a different light. "My name is Zax," the Ocampan said, his voice rich and resonant. "I lead a faction of rebels who have turned against our government's brutal campaign. We want to help you end this war." Dylan and his team exchanged glances, hardly daring to believe this stroke of fortune. With Zax's inside knowledge and the strength of the rebel fighters, they might just have a chance. The human and Ocampan rebel forces gathered, a strange and uneasy alliance united by a common goal. They boarded their ships and set course for the Ocampan homeworld, a heavily defended planet swarming with enemy ships and soldiers. As they entered the atmosphere, all hell broke loose. Plasma fire streaked across the sky as the Ocampan defenses opened up, their automated cannons and fighter screens filling the air with deadly light. Dylan and Zax led a strike team to the surface, their drop pods slamming into the rocky ground outside the capital city. They emerged into a maelstrom of chaos, Ocampan soldiers swarming to meet them. Gunner was in his element, his railgun roaring as he mowed down wave after wave of enemies. Chen darted from cover to cover, her stealth field flickering as she planted explosive charges at key points. Dylan and Zax fought side by side, human and Ocampan united against a common foe. Zax wielded a pair of plasma blades with deadly grace, his movements fluid and precise. Together, they carved a path through the enemy ranks, pressing ever closer to their target. At last they reached the entrance to the planet's core, where the Omega device would be detonated. But as they prepared to make their final push, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Kaga, the ruthless Ocampan commander. He was a behemoth towering over even the largest of his soldiers. His exoskeleton was adorned with cruel spikes and barbs, and his eyes glowed with a malevolent red light. "You dare to defy the might of the Ocampan Empire?" Kaga roared, his voice a grating metallic screech. "You will pay for your insolence with your lives." He lunged at Dylan, his plasma blades flashing. Dylan met him head-on, his own weapon sparking against the Ocampans. They clashed in a brutal dance, Dylan's enhanced strength pitted against Kaga's sheer size and ferocity. Beside them, Zax battled a group of elite guards, his movements a blur of speed and precision. But then a plasma bolt caught him in the side, burning through his armor. He fell, his blades clattering to the ground. Dylan, locked in combat with Kaga, saw his ally fall from the corner of his eye. Zax was gravely wounded, his life slipping away. Dylan faced a terrible choice: break off his fight to save his newfound friend, or press on and complete the mission, sacrificing himself to activate the Omega device and end the war. In the heart of the Ocampan homeworld, Dylan and Zax stood locked in mortal combat with the monstrous Kaga. Plasma blades clashed and sparks flew as they fought with desperate intensity. Dylan ducked under a vicious slash from Kaga's blade, retaliating with a precise strike that severed one of the Ocampan commander's armored limbs. Kaga roared in pain and rage, his remaining arms flailing wildly. Zax, bleeding heavily from his wound, staggered to his feet and charged at Kaga from behind. He drove his plasma blade deep into the Ocampan's back, the searing energy piercing through the thick exoskeleton. Kaga convulsed, his eyes bulging as he let out a guttural scream. But even as he fell, he fixed Dylan with a malevolent glare. "You think you've won, human?" Kaga rasped, dark ichor bubbling from his mandibles. "You know nothing. The Ocampan government is just a puppet, controlled by the Overmind, a cabal of psychics, manipulating us all." Dylan's eyes widened in shock as the implications sank in. The Ocampans, the war, everything. It had all been orchestrated by this hidden power. Suddenly a searing pain lanced through Dylan's skull. He cried out, falling to his knees, as a malevolent presence clawed at his mind. Around him, he could hear the agonized screams of his teammates, of the Ocampan rebels. The Overmind was attacking, seeking to control every sentient mind in the galaxy. Zax crumpled to the ground, his eyes rolling back in his head as the psychic assault overwhelmed him. But Dylan, his mind shielded by the Prothean technology within the Omega device, fought back against the invading presence. Through the haze of pain he saw the device, glowing with an otherworldly light. The Prothean's words echoed in his mind. The device could be used for destruction or creation. With a monumental effort, Dylan crawled towards the device. His vision swam and his limbs felt like lead, but he pushed on. He had to end this, not by destroying the Ocampan homeworld, but by freeing its people from the Overmind's insidious control. His fingers closed around the device, its surface thrumming with barely contained energy. Dylan focused his thoughts, pouring all his willpower into reshaping the device's purpose. The glow intensified, the device vibrating in his hands as it began to transform. Zax, his mind momentarily clear, staggered to Dylan's side. "Dylan, what are you doing?" he gasped, his voice strained with pain. Changing the game, Dylan gritted out. Hang on, Zax, this is going to get rough. Together, Human and Ocampan worked feverishly, modifying the Omega device into a beacon of psychic energy, a counter to the Overmind's malevolent influence. With a final, determined push, Dylan activated the device. A blinding flash erupted from its core, a pulsing wave of energy that swept across the planet's surface. The Overmind's psychic scream echoed through their minds, a wail of fury and despair as its control was shattered. Across the galaxy, the tide of battle turned. Ocampan soldiers, their minds suddenly freed, turned on their former masters. Human forces, no longer hindered by the psychic assault, surged forward with renewed determination. On the Ocampan homeworld, Dylan and Zack stood amidst the wreckage, the Omega device still glowing in Dylan's hands. They looked at each other, a newfound understanding and respect passing between them. The war was not yet won, but with the Overmind's defeat and the Ocampan rebels fighting alongside the humans, they now had a chance to end the conflict and forge a new era of peace and cooperation. The battle raged on, but hope had been rekindled in the hearts of all those who fought for freedom. In the aftermath of the Overmind's defeat, cheers erupted across the galaxy as both humans and Ocampans celebrated their hard-fought victory. On Earth, massive crowds gathered in the streets, waving banners and chanting the names of Dylan and his team. Zax and the other Ocampan rebels were hailed as heroes among their own people, their bravery and sacrifice recognized and honored. But even as the newly formed Human-Ocampan alliance worked to rebuild the shattered worlds and forge a lasting peace, trouble stirred in the depths of space. The Omega device, for all its power to free the Ocampans from the Overmind's control, had left scars upon the fabric of reality itself. Wormholes and anomalies flickered into existence, portals to strange and unknown realms. It was from one such anomaly that the Voidbringers emerged, nightmarish beings from a dimension beyond the bounds of normal spacetime. They sought to exploit the instability caused by the Omega device to invade and subjugate our universe. General Dylan Parker, his tactical mind as sharp as ever even in peacetime, found himself once again leading the charge against an alien threat. As reports of the Voidbringer incursions flooded in from across the galaxy, he rallied the combined forces of the Human-Ocampan alliance to meet this new foe head-on. The battles were like nothing Dylan had ever experienced. The Voidbringers were a horror beyond comprehension, their very presence warping reality around them. Nightmarish creatures poured from the wormholes, their twisted forms defying the laws of nature. The Alliance soldiers fought bravely, but for every Voidbringer they cut down, a dozen more seemed to take its place. In the heart of the conflict, Dylan conferred with his most trusted allies. Zax, his bond with Dylan forged in the fires of their shared struggle, stood ready to fight alongside his human comrades once more. Lieutenant Gunner, newly promoted for his unwavering bravery and skill, hefted his railgun with grim determination. "We can't keep fighting them like this," Dylan said, his brow furrowed as he studied the holographic map of the wormhole incursions. "We're losing too many good soldiers. We need to find a way to strike at the heart of their realm, to cut off the invasion at its source." It was a desperate plan, but they had no choice. Together with a hand-picked team of the Alliance's most elite warriors, Dylan and his comrades embarked on a perilous mission to venture through the largest of the wormholes, to brave the nightmarish realm of the Voidbringers themselves. As their ship plunged into the swirling maelstrom of the wormhole, reality twisted and buckled around them. Colors inverted, shapes distorted, and the laws of physics seemed to unravel. Dylan gritted his teeth against the disorienting sensations, focusing on the mission at hand. On the other side, they found themselves in a realm of madness and terror. The landscape shifted and changed before their eyes, a kaleidoscope of impossible geometries and mind-bending vistas. Voidbringer creatures, even more horrifying in their own domain, swarmed towards the intruders. Dylan and his team fought with a ferocity born of desperation, blasting their way through the horde. In the midst of the chaos, They stumbled upon an ancient structure, its alien architecture both beautiful and unsettling. Within its twisting corridors, they discovered a Prothean artifact, pulsing with an eerie energy. "This is it," Dr. Nakamura's voice crackled over the comm, awe and trepidation mingling in his tone. "The key to sealing the wormholes, to ending this invasion, but we must hurry." Just then a shadow fell over them. A monstrous form loomed from the depths of the Voidbringer realm, a being of pure darkness and malevolent power. The Shadow King, the most feared of all the Voidbringer warlords, had come to crush the intruders personally. As the Shadow King's dark power lashed out at them, reality warping and twisting under his onslaught, Dylan and his team knew they faced their greatest challenge yet. The fate of not just the human Ocampan alliance, but of the entire universe, hung in the balance. They had to succeed no matter the cost. Failure was not an option. The Shadow King loomed before Dylan and his team, a towering figure of darkness and malevolent power. Voidbringer warriors swarmed around them, their twisted forms shifting and writhing in the unnatural light of the alien dimension. Dylan and Zax charged forward, plasma rifles blazing. They cut through the Voidbringer ranks, their movements synchronized from countless battles fought side by side. Gunnar laid down covering fire, his singularity bombs ripping holes in the fabric of reality itself. "Zax!" Dylan shouted, blasting away a Voidbringer that had gotten too close. He could feel his friend's life force ebbing away, the psychic poison of the Shadow King's attack ravaging his body and soul. But Zax was not done yet. With a final, defiant roar, he unleashed a devastating psychic attack of his own. The Shadow King staggered back, his form flickering and distorting as Zax's mental onslaught tore at his very being. It was the opening they needed. Gunnar leapt forward, a miniature singularity bomb clutched in his hand. He activated the device and hurled it at the Shadow King, the air rippling and warping around it as it flew. The bomb detonated in a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar of sound. Voidbringer warriors were sucked into the collapsing pocket dimension, their screams echoing across the battlefield. But Gunnar, too close to the epicenter, vanished into the maelstrom, his final act of sacrifice buying his comrades a chance at victory. Dylan felt a surge of rage and desperation as he saw his friends fall. He reached out with his mind, tapping into the latent psychic abilities that the Prothean artifact had awakened within him. The ancient device pulsed with energy, amplifying his thoughts and emotions into a weapon of unimaginable power. He focused all of his anger, all of his grief, all of his iron will into a single overwhelming psychic assault. The Shadow King reeled as Dylan's mental onslaught crashed against his own, a titanic clash of wills that sent shockwaves rippling across the battlefield. Reality itself began to unravel as the two psychic titans struggled for dominance. The ground heaved and buckled, the sky split open, and the very fabric of space and time started to fray at the edges. But Dylan would not yield. He pushed harder, pouring every ounce of his strength into the psychic duel, and with a final shattering blow, he broke through the Shadow King's defenses and banished him back to the depths of the void. The remaining Voidbringers, their master defeated, scattered and fled, vanishing back into the wormholes from whence they came. Dylan, his mind and body pushed to the brink of collapse, summoned the last of his energy and used the Prothean artifact to seal the rifts, cutting off the Voidbringer realm from our own. As the dust settled and the echoes of battle faded away, Dylan stumbled to where Zax lay, his broken body already growing cold. He cradled his friend in his arms, tears streaming down his battle-scarred face. The war was won, but the cost had been high. Gunnar was lost, trapped in a shattered pocket of space-time, and Zax, the brave Ocampan rebel who had become like a brother to Dylan, had given his life to save them all. In the days that followed, the human Ocampan alliance worked to rebuild their shattered worlds, to heal the wounds that the war had inflicted. But for Dylan, the scars ran too deep. Haunted by the memories of those he had lost, tormented by the horrors he had witnessed, he resigned his commission and left the military behind. He sought solace in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, a place where he could find some measure of peace and perhaps, in time, redemption. But even as Dylan struggled to leave the past behind, he knew that his story was far from over. For in the depths of space, a new threat was stirring, a danger that would once again call upon him to stand against the darkness. And when that day came, Dylan would be ready. For he was a soldier, a warrior, a man who had stared into the abyss and refused to blink. He would fight on, no matter the cost, to protect the innocent and safeguard the future. For that was his duty, his calling, his solemn vow. And nothing, not even the shadows of his own tortured soul, would ever make him break it. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.